The Bulldogs lose 20-18 against the Sydney Roosters. I guess let's talk about it. I didn't want to do a really prolonged review because it was so disheartening. I'm a little bit heartbroken over the game. I can't deny that. And I guess let's put a little bit of context around this. We'll talk about the game in just a moment. But the Bulldogs going into the game, now if you didn't think that they were favourites to win, obviously that would probably be the most pragmatic thought process. I don't think that the Bulldogs had a right to be favourites despite being on a 3-game winning streak. The Roosters themselves on quite a convincing winning streak, second in the table, man for man, a much stronger lineup, a much more convincing spine even without James Tedesco. The Bulldogs for me on paper probably had a right to be competitive but no right to actually win the game. And talking about the game itself, I thought it was actually a little bit clunky, particularly that first half. The completion set from both teams was diabolical, and I thought even though the Dogs got a penalty goal to get ahead, the end scoreline flatters the Bulldogs. The Roosters scored 4 tries, the Bulldogs scored 3. So all things considered, the Roosters were the better side over the course of 80 minutes and deserved to win. However, in the grand scheme and in the context of the game, let's look at the second half. The Bulldogs, although going in behind 8 points to 2, got themselves in quite a strong position, particularly early on in that second half. Bailey Hayward, a nice line break, catching Lindsay Collins offside, a nice pass to Jacob Kiraz, who scores one of his 2 tries. And then you also had, in the second half, Lachlan Galvin, scoring a try, cutting through some defence, and then Jacob Kiraz getting his double. And the Dogs lead 18-8. And at that point, I think with 20-odd minutes left, you'd be right to be disappointed as a Bulldogs fan to finish the 80 minutes on the losing end of the scoreline. 10 points ahead, 20 minutes left. It was no longer about continuing to score points, but rather to have a little bit of game management, control, and professionalism. And normally you would point to your halves in these situations. You would say, all right, it's up to the halfback now to direct the team around the park to ensure that the Dogs are consistent, get to where they need to get to, complete their sets, kick to corners, kick it out when it's necessary, get the team a breather, and so forth. And I think there's a few reasons why the Bulldogs ultimately lost that game. So let's talk about those. Number one being the errors. The Bulldogs completed the game with a 66% completion rate. That's really poor. I mean, you can twist it, change yourself, the narrative around what you think the game was. 20-18, yep, I understand it. But the Bulldogs' handling errors, their completion rate overall was really, really poor. And I need to highlight 2 players and 2 key moments why I think the Dogs ultimately lost this game. One, Jethro Rinakama. He had a horror show, I think it was against the Warriors? I think it was against the Warriors. Might have been another game. Maybe against the Tigers. I digress. But there was a game not too long ago where Jethro just was putting down a lot of simple balls in the first half. And unfortunately in this game, we saw that Jethro Rinakama almost return. Just 4 handling errors, and a lot of those errors were in back-to-back sets when the Bulldogs were just on their own defensive line. And, I think that really took a lot of gas out of the Dogs, particularly in that second half. Then in the first half, just dropping really simple balls again. And I don't know if it's I think Jethro is definitely a confidence player. If he starts the game well, I think he grows into the game. But yeah, I mean, yesterday was not one of his better games. Now, that's not saying drop Jethro. That's not saying he's not up to first grade. But I think you're seeing his inexperience. I think you're seeing that he's still figuring out how to get himself mentally prepared week after week for the grind that is the National Rugby League, and he's not quite there yet. And people saying he's a kid. Well, I mean, he's 20. You've seen NRL players debut at 18. So, I don't think it's an age thing, but age doesn't change experience. And his experience in the NRL is limited. He's got less than 10 NRL games to his name. So, I think he can allow for some of that inexperience to shine through. But, 4 errors. It killed the Dogs. There's no 2 ways about it. And Jethro does need to go back and improve. And based on what I've seen over the last few weeks, I think he'll do that. I think he will go back and improve. But the one where I'm really critical, Connor Tracey. Now, yes, there's making errors, but then there's not competing for balls. There's making a decision not to attack a football. And that's a decision. That's a choice, right? You can go up, drop the ball. You don't intentionally drop balls. Jethro tried. Jethro dropped some balls, but I know he's trying. I know he's not intentionally trying to drop the ball. Connor Tracey, the most experienced player in the backline in terms of age, in terms of NRL games, probably alongside Stephen Crichton in terms of games. But his choice to let the ball bounce after the Bulldogs had just conceded points was such a poor one. And it's not just that it's a decision, but it's what it represents. To me, it was cowardly. It was lack of courage. It was a lack of bravery. A lack of everything that the Bulldogs stand for. And Connor Tracey's had a very inconsistent year. And I can't sit here and expect him to be James Tedesco or Reece Walsh. He doesn't have that natural level of talent. But Connor Tracey, for the most part, has built a reputation at the Bulldogs for trying hard, for being all effort, being a good support player, making lots of runs, making good yardage out of his own end. And in the last few weeks, we've almost seen a bit of a renaissance of Connor Tracey, and it just unfortunately has not put it together yesterday against the Roosters. To let a ball bounce after conceding points, you're still in the lead, the game's on the line, but crucially, the Bulldogs season is on the line. Now, the Bulldogs can still make the top 8, but in the context of this game, it goes from the Bulldogs having it all in their own hands to relying on some results to go their way. And that, for me, is unforgivable. It's not against Connor Tracey, the individual. Like, you can be critical of a performance and it doesn't make that person good or a bad person. But in terms of being a first grader, it was unforgivable. And for being an experienced player in the backline, it was unforgivable. So Connor Tracey really needs to have a big game next week against the Rabbitohs. One player I do want to give a heap of praise to is Jacob Kiraz. This guy just goes length to length, game to game, and he just gets better. He is truly the definition of aging like a fine wine. Because the more experience Jacob Kiraz demonstrates in the NRL, the more he convinces you that he is destined for higher runners, for state of origin representation. And his ability to see that there was no fullback, to kick in behind and regather the ball at the back end of that first half. Yeah, it didn't come off, but that's the opposite. That's the inverse of what Connor Tracey demonstrated. Trying to attack balls, be brave, taking a chance when it's on, critical thinking, critical decision making versus being cowardly, not attacking balls when your game is on the line, when your season's on the line, and the lead is on the line. That's the difference. But Connor Tracey, Jacob Kiraz, you're seeing polar opposites there. Jacob Kiraz, for me, the Bulldogs' best on ground. He should be extremely proud of his performance. He could not have done more for the Bulldogs yesterday to secure the victory. Well done, Jacob Kiraz. In terms of the Roosters, I have to give him praise. They shut down the Bulldogs' back rowers. Viliami Kikau, Jacob Preston did not get one-on-one with Sam Walker, with Daly Cherry Evans. They didn't get the time and space to be destructive, and they've been the cornerstone of the Bulldogs' attack over the last few weeks with the success that they've had in the most recent results, and the Roosters nullified that game plan. So you have to give credit where it's due there. And the Roosters, they came up against a motivated side, a red-hot side. They themselves lacked discipline with the ball, but in the critical moments, they won the game. And they're demonstrating why they're absolutely contenders for this premiership. A big game next week, Roosters and Panthers, because it essentially becomes for the minor premiership. For the Dogs, South Sydney next week. Big game. South Sydney rooted in the top 8. Bulldogs aspiring to be in the top 8. They fall out of finals positions as of this round with the loss due to the Cowboys win. But the Dogs need to bounce back against South Sydney. I think next week is one of the few games where you can say it's win or lose. If the Dogs lose against South Sydney next week, I think that's our finals hope just about dusted. So there you have it, a quick review of the Bulldogs game. Who was your best on ground? Are you still confident the Dogs can make the finals? Let me know below. And who's your premiership favourite? Warriors, big win over the Panthers. Huge. Statement. And Roosters obviously coming strong. Panthers, a little bit of a wobble over the last month or so. Few things to consider. Enjoy your rugby league, enjoy your weekend, and get out.